Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on workflow automation, what every printer needs to know. I'm Dave Erlinson. I'm with PODI and Caslon, and I'm delighted to have with me today Chris Bradshaw, General Manager at AlphaGraphics in Layton, Utah. Todd Vaniski, Marketing Manager for Workflow Software, I think Global Workflow Software for Xerox, and Christine DeLuz of PODI and Caslon, who's helping us make sure we're on track here. So today's webinar is going to be interesting. I think what I really like about the topic today, the workflow automation topic, and what we're going to cover is that it's a great example of how workflow automation can work in a small to medium-sized shop, right? So we typically hear a lot about workflow automation, but you generally hear about it in really large shops, right, where there's high volumes and you have the same jobs over and over again. And that's, you know, from a theoretical standpoint, that's a lot easier to implement than a job shop. But today we're going to hear from someone who runs a job shop environment and how they've applied workflow automation and the barriers that they've faced and overcome to implement those and make that pay off in their shop. So that's going to be a fun discussion today. Before we jump into that, though, I just want to go over some of the housekeeping rules. Christine, do you want to take us through that?
Sure. Okay, so when you joined today, you were put in a mute-only mode, and that's so we can maintain good audio quality and hopefully not have a lot of background noise. But that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We'd love to get your questions, and what we'll ask you to do is use the question area in the GoToWebinar toolbar. Now, if you're on the web-based app, you'll be like clicking on this little question mark tab and then typing in the text box. And if you're in the desktop app, it'll look more like this, and you can expand the questions area with this line here, and then again type in the text box, hit send, and then either Dave or I will see those questions and we can field those to either Chris or to Todd if necessary. All right. And one of the first questions that's always gets asked is the session being recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. And following today's session, once the recording is available, we will send you an email with a copy, a PDF copy of the presentation, as well as a link to the recording so that you can review it again.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christine. All right. Well, one of the things that we'd like to do is, before we dive into talking to Chris, just share some of the information that we're gathering at PODI and Caslon. And every year we do surveys of the digital printing market. This year we're surveying in North America. And we've been asking some questions about software, and I thought it'd be interesting as a nice introduction to this topic to bring you up to speed on some of the things that we're seeing in the market today. So we've asked about 200 commercial printers, quick printers, digital printers in plants about the software that they have in their facility, in their shops today. And you can see on the chart that web-to-print software is leading the way at almost 80% adoption. Variable data composition is second, with 2/3 of the folks having that. And you can see the rest. What's kind of interesting, I think, in light of today's webinar is that workflow automation software has actually got the lowest adoption in the market today, and I think that there's some opportunities around that, and we'll see that throughout the day. We did a little deeper dive on web-to-print, and it's one thing to have web-to-print software. Christine, can you go to the next slide? The next is to use it. And so we also track what kind of adoption, what kind of flow we're getting through web-to-print systems, so something you can compare to your shop. This year, a little over 25% of the volume is flowing through web-to-print software, and next year people think that that's going to rise. So every year we see the same pattern where the expectation is it's going to grow. It never quite grows as fast as the folks think, but it's been steadily marching forward over time, and we'll continue to track that as we go along. Next slide, Christine. We also asked a couple questions around VDP. 2/3 of the folks have the software. Always interested in what percent of the variable data work is really what I call deeper personalization, right? And beyond the address and salutation. And you can see around 25% of the direct mail is using some deeper personalization. And then what was of interest quite a couple of years ago, QR codes. Next slide, Christine. We've been tracking the use of QR codes, and that's kind of leveled off in the low teens. So what was really a hot topic a few years ago is not so much being used as it once was. And then the last question I wanted to cover with you is what's your purchase intent for 2017? What are you going to buy? And if you remember back, the lowest percent adoption of software was workflow automation. But in terms of purchase intent, the highest intent from our survey is workflow automation. And so that's a good lead-in to today's webinar, where we're going to have Chris talk about how he has gone through the process of purchasing and implementing workflow software. Two things we're going to do, two questions of you before we jump into that. So we have two polling questions we want to ask you, and let me turn that over to Christine, and she'll take you through how to answer those.
Okay, so we have our first polling question up, and Dave, just confirming, are you seeing that on the screen right now?
I am.
All right, great. Okay, so what inefficiencies exist in your current workflow right now? If you could take a moment to click on that, and we'll give you a few seconds to participate in that. About a quarter of you have voted so far, so.
So chime in, click the button, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah. Okay, we're give it just a couple more seconds here, and then we'll move on here. Okay, let me close this out, and I'll display the results here so you can see what it looks like. All right, Dave, results should be showing right now. So it looks like our greatest one of for as far as inefficiencies is file checking and pre-press preparation.
Right.
And then the second there.
Yep, 60% of the people are doing that. That's been a problem in the printing industry forever, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, let me go to the next poll question. Hold on here. Okay, our second question here about asking, what are your top workflow initiatives for the coming year? Okay, it looks about like half of you have voted so far. We'll give it just a few more seconds, and then we'll move on. Okay,
all right,
let me close this out here.
See what people are thinking, right?
Yeah, okay, so it looks like the top one there is improved process automation, followed by integration of workflow components.
Right. So, okay, well that makes sense with the workflow initiatives to get more, to reduce the number of touches and keep the jobs flowing smoothly through the organization. All right, thank you for voting on that, on those polls and participating. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Chris Bradshaw. As I said, he's General Manager of AlphaGraphics in Layton, Utah. And Chris is going to tell us his story. But Chris, if you'd first start off with, tell us a little bit about your background and the profile of your business.
Sounds great. My name's Chris Bradshaw. As he said, I'm with AlphaGraphics in Layton, Utah. I'm the General Manager. I'm excited to be here today. I just would like to be able to tell you a little bit about our story, about what we've been doing for the last 6 months or so, and how it's helped our company, and hopefully some of that can be something that's valuable to you. My background, I've been working about the last 20 years, half of my time in direct mail marketing, printing of some sort, half of my time in IT, on-site service, and all kinds of things in that arena. Most recently, I worked for a company here locally called PZ Printing. They're a rather large company for our area, and I spent a couple years doing web to print exclusively, building sites, and a lot of the programming logic and such that goes with that. So that helps a little bit too with technology and looking at automation. My greatest strengths, I'm a very passionate and driven person. I work really hard, and I'm really great at problem solving. So, in my last, 20 years, I've probably spent about 9 years going off and trying to run my own business, either in computers or in printing or direct mail. And, I've kind of looked at all of that and decided that I wanted to be able to use my greatest strength to the fullest. And I have joined with Jaron Hale is the owner here at AlphaGraphics. He's an accountant, and so about 15 years ago in 2002, he decided to purchase an AlphaGraphics franchise. I think it was barely staying alive at the time. He has worked very hard, done most of the sales for the company and relationship building. We've grown 5 or 10 times, depending on what statistics you look at, and he's grown every year. AlphaGraphics has, maybe 260 plus franchises in the United States. There's some outside the United States in other countries. We usually rank 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that, and amongst all the franchises. Last year, the Franny Award, which was a really big deal, and that was a testament to Jaron's hard work. But about 1.5 years ago, he decided he was going to build a new building and wanted to invest in that, and already had kind of, from all his involvement in sales, already had needed someone to manage operations and technology and help move the future forward. So back in November, we moved here into our new building, 12,000 square feet, which is a lot bigger. He had expanded a few times before in his old location, but we were busting at the seams and needed some room to grow. And so we built this wonderful building and have moved here back in November. That's about a month and a half before that is when I started working on implementing this FreeFlow Core software that we will be talking about today. So I've been looking for an opportunity like this for a long time, somewhere where I can get involved in the retail environment and try and perfect some of the systems that come with taking print orders and moving them through. Let's see, let me just tell you a little bit about our company here. We do have a copy center in the front of it. It represents about 3% of our business. The other 97% is business to business. We have 18 plus full-time employees, 4 in sales, 5 in customer service, a production manager, all the regular departments, design, pre-press, digital offset, bindery, large format, fulfillment. We do quite a bit with that, and then delivery. Types of customers, we have anywhere from a 10-cent copy up to, $1 million clients. Small to medium-sized businesses, financial institutions, real estate, franchises, service industries, tires, dry cleaning, construction, restaurants, fast food, hospitality, professional services, accountants, attorneys, doctors, dentists, hospitals, artists, students, brokers, schools, and universities. And then some of our typical applications are, business cards, postcards, brochures, signs, banners, blueprints, forms, books, booklets, promotional products, some point of purchase, a lot of manuals, PPM manuals, and we also do some web to print storefronts for some of our customers when it applies. We have quite a good gamut of capability here. Digital color presses, black and white, have a 2-color offset, finishing, a lot of bindery with lamination, UV coating, booklet making, book making, large format. I don't know if I mentioned that. Some equipment back there. So we have really good capability and the ability to turn things quick. The hard part is can we actually get the job from the customer, get all the details worked out, get it into production, and get back to them on time without messing up and missing communication and all the pieces that go involved there. And that's really what I'm here to work through and to help Jaron with. Some of the challenges we have.
So Chris, you just defined a job shop, right? You all the different applications that you produce, I mean, all the
Right.
different industries that you serve, right? Every day is different, right? I mean, so,
Yep.
okay. All right, so tell us about some of your workflow challenges that you saw when you got there then.
Yeah, so, because of this kind of fast moving, we have a lot of walk-in, 150 probably customer service contacts, including phones and walk-in and emails every single day. We have, I counted 9 different people that are handling files in one way, shape, or form. They're preparing it to go to the machine, or they're counting our design department and a handful of CSRs and a couple other people that are, getting files ready. And then everyone does whatever they do completely differently. So each person has their way of doing things, and we needed to be able to standardize and to put some rules in place and to kind of find best practices. Some of the things that would happen, we have artists that would take our orders and they lay them out. Every time it gets ready to go to the machine, they're actually laying it out there themselves before it goes to the machine. And a lot I noticed is a lot of time spent. Somebody shows up, they want to print something, and they bring you this file, and it's nowhere near ready to print. And you got to figure out what to do with it. And then once you figure out what size they're going to want and what shape, and if it has a bleed and all that, you then, is it going to fit best on 11 by 17 or 12 by 18 or 13 by 19 paper? And I'm talking a lot about color digital. Most of this will all be probably primarily about color digital. I have noticed that the workflows that we build, almost all of them do apply to all of our color digital jobs. But a lot of time can be spent, trying to get an estimate, trying to maybe even 20 minutes or so on that part, getting the invoice, the estimate, the job ticket, and then sometimes that much time is also spent preparing the file and getting it ready to go to print. And so I wanted to see how many things we could do where we can make it a very simple process, maybe spend a minute or two and move it on to production and skip a lot of that baggage.
So your problems line up with the polling results that we saw, right? The large number of our attendees today have issues with getting those files ready to print, right? That was the #1 issue, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's I think that's pretty accurate for sure.
Okay.
So, I had some ideas, and I'd spent, right when I got here, I started looking at all the technology we had, started reading manuals. Our MIS system had a 500-something page manual, and I went through that immediately. I went through the Fiery software manuals. Anything I could read that had to do with technology and our equipment and our software here. I wanted to understand the extent of what we could do and what we couldn't do, and then look to the future and what we wanted it to do. At that time, so a few months in, Jaron surprised me with this Duplo slitter, 646, and that's something that I really wanted. And he found the right deal and bought it, and I immediately dove in and looked up how to set up templates, and immediately recognized a need for the jobs to come in now in a different way than they had come in before. Because now if something was going to go through the slitter to be finished, it had to fit exactly how it was programmed on the machine. And that's not how things were being done. And, it would take some work with our employees to get them to want to integrate and work towards that. So we're starting to figure out what we need to do with automation, and we get all of these, slitter templates set up. This is on the left what our little workflows that I made in the beginning look like. It would say, the paper that's going on, how many up, and then the finish size, then how many up, then the paper it's going on. I did notice that the machine likes to work with gutters much better than without, and also you need a front trim and a side trim. So that kind of dictated a little bit what applications we were going to use it for and how we were going to mold our workflow. But then the next step was getting the files to look like that. So I went over to our Fiery command workstation on our device and used the Impose tool and made some job presets. And made it so that if you made a one-up file, and at the time I based it on the crop box, and we cropped everything down to whether it had a bleed or not, and the bleeds all were 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then they would drop in these folders, but there was a gazillion of them. And then I had to kind of train everyone, well, this is what will fit in there, and this is what will fit in there, this folder or that folder. I had to figure out that a 5x7 would fit, you know, right here, 4 up on a 12x18, and so would an 8.5 by 5.5, and so on and so forth. And then kind of get everybody to think that way. Some problems that we had with this type of scenario is the machine. If the machine crashes, you can try to back these things up. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You got to reset everything up from scratch. And there's just a lot of limitations. Plus, you have to do this on every single machine that you want to use this for. And also there's a lot just trying to find the right workflow sometimes, and not being able to do maybe as much or as powerful as I would like to do. So, you know, the next thing was to look at over here on the right. This is a little snapshot of some templates that I built in our MIS system where we make our orders and create our job tickets. And once again, I can give someone an order and they can go write it up, and it might take them 20-something minutes to get it all what it needs to be. Some of these templates, they can click on it, and with a couple more clicks, the thing it's done and ready to go. So you're saving time there. You're integrating it then to where the file is going to be one up instead of trying to lay it up, and then you're dropping it in the workflow. So we're already having a decent workflow, something that's better than it was. And we did start having, you know, there's a lot of trying to figure out how to get everything to line up and calibrate, and then to get the slitter to cut on the line where it's supposed to be. And we'll talk a little bit later. There's a few things that I learned even recently after months and months of doing this, or more like a year actually, over a year we've had the slitter. But I just discovered kind of the secret recipe to getting stuff to look good once you go through this whole process. Let me see. So what we'll move on to now is I did some research to figure out, once the Xerox guys came out to do service on our machine, and the software guy came out, and he looked at all my workflows, and they were reinstalling the server, and he says, hey, why don't you get this FreeFlow Core software, and then it'll go to all your machines. You won't have to reset this up every time the machine crashes or whatever. And so I did spend some, I knew about the software, but I then, you know, I did a webinar and I looked at starting the trial, and I got all the information I needed about the software. But then I wanted to do my due diligence, and so I called up EFI, and I had them set up a webinar with me also and give me a couple-hour demonstration, asked them all the questions that I wanted to know. You know, there's a couple considerations. We have some Xerox printers. We have XMPi web-to-print software, so having those two Xerox products, it seemed like it might make sense to get the Xerox FreeFlow software. But we also have our MIS is built by EFI, and then there's EFI FireEase, and so I'm thinking, you know, either way, maybe it would be good integration-wise once I see how everything plays together. But it really came down to one thing, and what that is if you look at the screen here, this is a snapshot of, and this was for me, so I'm trying to solve the problems that we have in our shop, and what I felt like was the biggest thing that would be most helpful to automate and to save us time was right here in the middle of the screen where it says auto rows and columns. So this is a little screenshot from inside the FreeFlow Core program where you set up your templates. And what this will do, and the EFI software would not do this, and I made sure that I got a for sure answer on that before I made my decision, is once you set up the decisions in here, like your gutters, let me go back there, like your gutters and your where your trim marks are going to be, what size sheet it's going to go on, and all kinds of other decisions that are in the different layers of the software, it will take whatever you drop in it, and I've told it right here to look at the trim box of the file, and it will lay it out however many it can fit on the sheet automatically, and it'll flip it whichever way. If I tell it to automatically go, you know, landscape or portrait, it'll flip it out. So I could drop a business card in here, I could drop a postcard in here, I can drop a flyer in here. It doesn't matter. It'll always have a 1/4 inch gutter. It'll always lay it out correctly. It'll always take into account my margin area. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I hear a little crackling there.
Sorry.
No, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah.
So it'll always lay it out that way, and that to me was hugely valuable that this software would do that, and really what I wanted out of it, although it does so much more, I wanted to leverage, just say, okay, guys, you know, this is how you make a trim box. You know, make sure your bleed is outside that area, and make sure, you know, that you just grab it and drop it in the right folder, and then it will just auto lay out. And so that was huge. That was probably the pinnacle decision-making process why I chose the Xerox FreeFlow Core. So here's a little picture on the right here, the horizontal one. This is a sample workflow. This is our double-sided business card workflow. In the software, you know, there's all these modules on the left that you can pick. You bring them in, and then you program them when you get in them to do what you want. The first one, so let's say this is a portrait business card. It will take it and it'll rotate the front to the left, and then the next one will rotate the back to the right. That way they'll be not upside down when you print. We added this trim box. We didn't need to do that because it comes in with the trim box, but you know, they give you 8 hours of training when you buy this software, so this was some things we were playing with that we could do. If you move on a couple more modules further there, that's my imposition, and we actually tell it exactly how to lay it out because we know that only business cards are being dropped in this box. Then it actually puts this Duplo registration mark, which is a little right angle mark up in the right corner of the sheet that the machine, the Duplo, will read when it comes in and try to register a little more accurately. And I actually put another module on that allowed some operator instructions to be included down in the margin area. So it could say pick, you know, job number 10 on the slitter, and makes it, you know, easy for them to decide. And then this last part I really love, and that is I can tell it which machine to go to, and I can tell it to go to the whole queue, or I can tell it to go to the print queue. And there's some things in there that you can program, like pull paper out of this drawer or make all of these, you know, whatever. Another cool thing about it is it brings whatever you do, like in this layout template, you tell it it's double-sided. It brings all those settings into the printer, and then you don't have to go pick, you know, top and landscape or whatever. It just does that automatically. So there's a lot of savings there, steps outside of just the fact that it lays it out that you know you would have to do, and depending how well trained the employee is or how good they are at their job, they may or may not pick the right option. But where we have so many people and we have turnover, and it's so long for people to get trained up to know all the processes they have to do, this simplifies things a lot. Let's see. So this is programming logic. It's not writing code, but it is, you know, you want someone who's able to go through and logically decide, you know, A plus B equals C and all the things that need to happen in here. All right, let's move on. So I would say this representation is a pretty huge saving point in our business. There's some results that we get out of it. Jobs go into the design department, they sit in a bin and wait for someone to get to them. It may take 2 or 3 days, and that pushes our turnaround times back. And so working with the design department and convincing them that we need to make a one-up file on all of our print readies when they make files, and then all the other people that touch files that bring them in, knowing that it just needs to be a one-up file, and getting some people like, we have a girl that's dedicated right now to just running the quick run jobs that come to the shop because we have so many of them, and she can take a file, make sure it has a trim box in the right place, vet it, whether it has a bleed or what it needs, and then drop it in a workflow, and it's on the machine, and press print, and then drop it in the slitter, and that job is done extremely quickly. Sometimes we do it while the customer's waiting in the lobby. We try not to do that, but if they push and want it really bad, then they end up getting it. Let's see. So this is a real savings for us, and it's a real problem that has a certain percentage that's been solved. Many jobs used to go into our design department. We have 2 designers that skip it altogether at this point. And that helps that job go more quickly, but it also has lightened the load for them so they can spend more time on the jobs that really need that type of a service. So, I'll give you another example also. I was going to talk about this back on the other slide, but we have a customer that prints, she sells these art prints on Etsy, and she sells quite a bit of them at this point. And the way that she was submitting her orders to us, she was sending just a gazillion emails, and she'd say, well, I want 2 of these, and she'd have a bunch of attachments on them, and I want 4 of these, and this size and that size, and the people who were running the jobs were grabbing this paper to put that one on. 11 by 14 went on 11, went on 11 by 17, and 8.5 by 11, or 8 by 10 went on 8.5 by 11, and 5 by 7s would either go on 2 up on the one or 4 up on the other, and depending on who handled the job, and then depending on who handled the job, they do it all different ways. And then by the time it got to finishing, she wanted us to just print them out, and then she was going to cut them out herself so she could save money on cutting. And then she would go stand in the lobby where we have a counter and these little slitters, and she'd stand there for a few hours every time she came in, and she'd slit all these cards up herself. And I talked to her, and I said, what if I could build you a solution that would make this a lot easier for you and a lot easier for us also, because the way that you're doing it is causing a bunch of work on both ends that I don't think really needs to be there. And what we came up with was I created a web-to-print storefront so that she could upload her art. So she can upload her 5 by 7s or 8 by 10s or 11 by 14s. And then those orders come from online, and they go through FreeFlow Core, and then they lay out on the sheet, and then they go to the printer. And they all lay out on 12 by 18, and they all match a template that's in the slitter. And so I told her, I said, if I build this, I'm not going to charge you for cutting because we're going to save a bunch of time on the way we have to handle these files. And we'll get that benefit, and then you'll get the benefit of not standing there in the lobby all day cutting these things. And she thought that was great. So it's actually extremely simple. Her file comes through, it's laid out, we press print, and then we go drop it in the slitter. And then we locate her job, and she comes and picks it up. So that's a little real-world example of a small problem that can be solved with this type of a scenario. Some other things that we run into is if our files are all being laid out in random ways because we have so many people touching them, by the time it gets to the bindery department, this person didn't put crop marks on, that person didn't put a gutter, this person didn't account for a bleed. And a lot of times these jobs are just slipping through the cracks because they couldn't wait to get in the bindery department, and the guy at our printer wasn't willing to look at it and try and figure out how to make it usable, on the page for cutting. So they would just cram it onto a sheet one way or another and print it, and then the bindery department would either mess up on cutting because they don't understand what it is, or have to spend a bunch of time trying to figure it out, or have to put the job on hold while they wait to ask someone who's not there that day what the heck they did with the job and what the real parameter was on it. So we had a lot of that going on, and being able to have a standard, you know, putting this, the FreeFlow Core doesn't solve everything for us, but by saying we're going to have a one-up and we're going to have a trim box, then everything else gets worked around those rules, and so it integrates really well. You know, on the left we have a job that was dropped in the workflow that has a bleed, and on the right we have a job that was dropped in the workflow that doesn't have a bleed. You only print a few sheets of business cards digitally, and so to me, trying to, you know, the time it would take to write up a different ticket with a bleed or no bleed, and then to change out the paper in the machine, and then to to change out the paper in the machine, and then to you know, get this over to be cut. Sorry, I'm just drinking a little bit of water here. It didn't make sense if I could just drop every card in the same box and then just drop it in the slitter and then just package it up. We didn't have to make that thought process and try and decide, oh, should I do this way, or maybe I'll save a few more on a sheet. In the end, you know, if we save some on the sheet, all I'm doing is selling it for less, and then it's taking me a lot to produce it, so we're taking less money from the company and we're spending more resources to produce it. And so on small run, quick turn jobs, and because of the strengths of the slitter being around, you know, having those edges around the sheet to cut anyway, most of those jobs just get dropped in a workflow that have a gutter and then get dropped in the slitter. So they'll all lay out the same. And, you know, this is an example of what we don't want. You know, someone just pulls something up and uses some tool to lay it up on a sheet and print it, and it doesn't have anything it needs, like a bleed area or an exact place to cut or any of those things. So we end up with the, you know, and then the communication with the customer a lot of times doesn't happen. When I say they have to have a trim box and it has to be an 1/8 inch bleed, then when they go to make it, they see that the text is outside the trim box or it's too close to the cut line, you know, that there's not a bleed, and then that facilitates us getting with the customer earlier and getting the correct file in. So moving on to the next slide, this is probably the biggest point that I want to make, because we're going to talk in a minute about, you know, how this has helped us maybe with savings, you know, how have we saved money by using this, or what's the advantage to having this software efficiency-wise. In my mind, you know, having this in place needs to be done with all the other pieces in mind, and it enables us to be able to make some decisions that we might not otherwise make or be able to make, because you kind of have to look at the whole project. And let me just, there is one thing I do want to make sure I don't skip, because I don't think it's later on in the presentation here, and that is, this is the key to getting this to work physically and technically, and that is, what I found is that the slitter has to be calibrated extremely precisely. We had our techs coming out to calibrate it, and it just, the lines weren't cutting where they needed to, and after using it for 8 months, I was worried that I couldn't depend on it to give me the result I was looking for. It was too inconsistent with where it would cut, depending, and I had to fiddle with every single template to get, and it was just a lot, way too much work. So I finally just, like after like 6 visits from them, I just stayed here one night for 5 hours and dug through the service manuals and recalibrated the slitter. And when I did, I calibrated it as precise as it could be calibrated, and it's awesome. It cuts exactly where it says it's going to cut. And so that's A. And then, you know, when we were first messing with this whole slitter and printing thing, I thought the slitter was cutting skewed, and then I realized the printer was printing skewed, and then all of a sudden I start realizing that, you know, our operator isn't making sure that our registration is right on front to back, the crop marks are 1/16 of an inch apart, and I started dealing with all those problems. And what I found, especially on these newer machines, is that registration can be really tight. And if you'll just run a registration profile on that very frequently and make sure that they line up exactly front to back, I mean, almost exactly, it's really close. And then also that it's centered on the page, because if it's not centered on the sheet, when you put it through a slitter, the cuts are going to be off to the side. And that registration mark on the Duplo doesn't really help the situation like you'd think it would. You do have to get this correct at the printer. And then, hold on a second. If your printer won't do it and it's a newer printer, you just call the service guy out and they'll fix the baseline calibration, and you have to rebuild all your profiles. But the other part of that too is getting these guys to coordinate with you, your employees. They just, I guess I'll talk about that in a little bit, but back to the slide that we're on, you know, when you combine some efficiencies or maybe some templating in your MIS software, so you don't spend a lot of time there, and then you skip some manual processes you were doing, then you put this FreeFlow Core into place, and then you, you know, get everything set up, you're printing your slitter and all that. In my mind, there are some really significant time savings there. I'll give you another example. We actually had some attrition recently. You know, as I'm making changes, you know, some people aren't comfortable with that. They've been here forever and want to do things a certain way, and we're changing the game on them, and that's just what happens in business, and so they've moved on. An interesting thing is we lost one or two members of our customer service team up front, which is, I mean, they're the ones messing with all this stuff I'm talking about, and their job is extremely difficult and high-paced, and they just have to know a lot of stuff. And what was interesting was I didn't fill those positions immediately, and with them leaving and with the new rules in place that people were following, it was actually easier and less stressful than when they were here. So we were able to, all of a sudden, we didn't have loose ends, we didn't have jobs laying around, we didn't have, you know, all of these problems, because we did some specialization with this, and specialization of employees, you know, kind of giving them more specialized tasks. And with all the pieces together, I mean, you're not going to just go fire someone because you're being more efficient, but if that person can use their time to add more value to the company or to become better at their job, you know, rather than whatever else they were doing, because we saved them time, then that's a win for the future of the company. So moving on to some maybe closer to something that looks like numbers. You've got to, I'm comfortable with saying there's no way that we don't save at least $5, you know, as an average per imposition that we use. You know, I looked at yesterday's impositions. We ran 30-something for the day. You know, 25 or 30 or more is been our average. And as they get better at implementing the processes, we're using it more and more. So that still has quite a better room to grow for us. When I say $5, you know, you could look at just the savings on the time of imposition and then fill in with the file and give that a low average. When you add in all the other things I'm talking about, the efficiencies that you can build with really paying attention to your whole system, it's definitely much, much more. And I would challenge you to take a file to, you know, someone in your company, and if they're really good, they could be pretty quick most of the time. But a lot of times what happens here is, you know, you can give someone a file and say, go get this ready to print, and if you didn't have all this stuff in place, you know, 20-something minutes later, they're still not done. And And so I think this is an extremely conservative number here, and I think that the usefulness for it will grow as we grow into it and learn how to use it better. And keep in mind, too, that there's a lot of things in this software. Back on some of those older slides, you know what, I didn't talk to you guys about this left side. Maybe you got a chance to look at it here on this slide. But, you know, there's some pre-flight, some optimization, color management, image enhancing, watermarks, page numbers. You know, there's a lot more that this software can do than what I'm talking about. And there's a lot more, there's an even higher package than we purchased that has more capability. You could almost make a couple of folders where anything you drop it in, it will make its way to its finished layout with some advanced programming modules that they give you in the highest package that you can buy, and it'll make decisions based on what it sees and just go right down a decision path until you have a finished product. So it's a very powerful software. Keep in mind that, you know, you will experience bugs, you know, as you're building stuff. It'll work great, and then all of a sudden you'll have a new problem show up that you didn't have before. So you do need time to troubleshoot things. Their support, you know, does get back to you and work with you on it, and you will need to work through the technology side of it. But to me, it's extremely worth it.
Hey, Chris, thanks. That was great. That was great. Great story. Hey, if you could, we're running a little short on time, but can you just take a minute and talk about a little bit about the soft side of what you had to do to get your employees on board with this, and then we'll turn it over to Todd. But I think that's pretty important as well, right?
Yeah, let me just wrap that up here in the end. You know, let's see. So we'll move ahead of this. So getting the owner to buy in, he looked at me cross-eyed. You know, I told him, I'm not a great sales guy. I told him, I said, hey, I want this software. This is how much it costs. And he's like, well, does it do anything for me? And then I tried to explain the benefits, and he had already shut his brain off. So it took me 3 to 6 months to get him on board to buy it, but eventually he invested that trust in me. Then the other employees, you know, the hard parts that we run into is reverting back to their old ways. So they don't really understand what they're doing yet, and they try something and it doesn't work the way they think, and the day is really busy and they just need to get it done. So they hurry back and just do it the way they know how to do it. And then they put it like using the new solution is, we'll do that later. And then there never is a later. So I've kind of been a little Gestapo and saying, no, you come grab me when you don't know how to use it, and I'll walk you through it. And, you know, golly, people don't want to change. I mean, if that's the biggest thing that I've learned in the last year and a half, nobody wants to change anything. From the owner down to the delivery driver, it doesn't matter. They dig their heels in. They like the way they're doing them. This picture on the right over here is probably a really good illustration. Well, I got it done, so what are you complaining about? You know, and it's like, well, you know, we're moving towards a better world, and if you guys can buy in, and it's slow but sure, it takes time, and in the end, in my mind, if they don't want to get on board, then we need to make some changes there, because the company needs to grow and change and evolve, and that's what it's all about, you know, in today's world. You know, so wrapping it up, you know, my recommendations for this to make this successful is figure out what you want to do and how this applies to your situation. It won't be exactly what I did, but before you do anything, look into the software. They have a couple-month trial or something, and then, you know, really figure out what you're trying to accomplish. And then once you are in the trial, look at it and see what it'll do. But, you know, before you go doing any of that, you know, there is an investment, and the investment is not just how much it costs. It's all the time that someone is going to spend making this work, and then all the training and changing in the company. And it's a really decent investment, and then decent size investment. And then the biggest thing you need is you need someone to champion this. This person needs to have a very high technical aptitude, They need to want this. It needs to be high on their brain, and they need to make sure this is something they're going to do no matter what. They need the time to invest, and then the employees need to trust this person, because that just makes it all more difficult. You bring someone in from the outside, and who are you? And you got to go through that, and that's what we've been through. But a year and a half in, we're a lot better on that front, and they trust me a lot more. And then just the patience and the time to implement it.
Great.
So do you have any other questions for me, Dave?
Well, we're going to hold the questions to the end, but if you out there have a question for Chris, feel free to type it in to the question bar on the GoToWebinar panel. And now what I think we should do, Chris, because we're a little short, Christine, because we're a little short on time, is I think we should pass over those two polling questions and go right to Todd. Todd Vaniski of Xerox, Worldwide Marketing Manager for the Software Business Group, will give us some tips about how to get started as well on figuring this out, and share with us another case study from a customer in the UK. So take it away, Todd.
Thanks, and hello, everybody. I know that we've got about 10 minutes to go, and there is another video case study. I always think it's better to hear from, the customers and your peers or people in the same situation. But what I want to talk about quickly is, if you believe the story that automation is the way forward, how are you going to get there? So what I put together was just a list of things to start to think about and a way to think about it. Chris did a wonderful job of explaining his situation. But if you think, okay, what would be the driving force? What would make me move toward automation, or what am I going to look at? And Christine, if you can move it forward one more, I think we get to when you think about your shop. Chris' story was based on the impositions, and he has a lot of smaller sized applications or non 8.5 by 11 applications. So he saw an opportunity to lay files out more efficiently. So what you're going to look for to see where you're going to begin your automation journey, because I say automation is a journey. Chris talked very fluently about the time it takes to get things done. So you start small. You have a hot spot that you're after. So that hot spot is a bottleneck. You might know where you struggle today. It might be repetitive tasks. If there's people that are doing the same thing for a couple hours every single day, opening files, pre-flighting files, laying files out, checking for image off the page, flattening transparencies, programming your printers, whatever the tasks are that it's the exact same mechanical task over and over again, there's an opportunity for automation. If you have a lot of applications that are very similar, even if you think you're doing a very efficient job, if you can take a few minutes out of those applications, right? Chris said $5 a job. If you can take a few touch points out of that application, if you're running that application a lot, that adds up. You may know where your mistakes are made. Are they made in finishing? Are they made in programming? Are they made in order entry? Or I used to say it just comes down to touch points. When you touch a file, you are introducing a chance for a mistake, and you're also costing yourself money. So again, when you say, okay, I like automation, I like the story, what am I looking at? These are ways to look at your business, a couple of different filters you can put on it and see if there's an opportunity there for you to take advantage of automation. Christine, if you click again. So when we go, I have a different, I have to take even a more conservative path than Chris. But a lot of people, when we talk about automation, think, especially the small to medium size, you might be a little concerned about a major workflow investment from a time and a money perspective. And Chris talked about the time, the calendar time as well. I use the United States Department of Labor study. It says the average pre-press operator in the U.S. makes $20 an hour. So I tell folks, when you look at your shop today, let's find an hour a day that an automation system can take out of your process. That hour is $20 a day. It's $100 a week. And if you take 2 weeks a year that you're closed, it's $5,000 a year. And a lot of workflow solutions in our industry are in that $5K, $10K sort of range for the financial investment alone. So again, it's another way as you're sitting there thinking, how do I start? What questions do I ask? What's my return on investment? This is a real simple one here that says, look, if you find 1 hour a day, Chris talked about 30 jobs through his shop, remember? So if Chris finds 2 minutes in every job, That's his hour a day right there. And he says it takes longer than 2 minutes, right, when you give a file to anybody to lay out. I mean, 2 minutes goes by in a hurry just to open the file sometimes. So again, metrics to help you get a feel for where am I thinking financially, what are the implications. Chris went through a lot of the operational stuff. I wanted to talk through the mindset. So another slide here. What I was going to do is I have a couple slides that talk about FreeFlow Core. FreeFlow Core is the Xerox automation platform. This is our solution. Christine, I think if you click again, and I apologize, I didn't mean to put the builds in. Chris already in his talk track has gone through and showed you workflows and different components. So I'm going to skip that. There's a lot of tools available I'll talk about later as far as where you can go for next steps. What it's capable of doing, again, I won't go through today. There's resources at the end. I know we're up against the back end, but I do want to take a break here and play the PremCom community, the PremCom case study. Sorry, I got to slow down. I got ahead of myself there. Because again, it's another customer. It's a European customer, and they can talk about the implications to their business. So, Christine, if you could play that video now, I'll take a break, and that'll give us about 2 minutes at the end to wrap things up.
All right, here we go.
So, Christine, if you can jump then right just to the resources for the next steps. We can skip that slide. We'll skip over. We don't have the time today to cover it. But at the end of the video, you can see there's xerox.com/automate. That is the Xerox automation platform core. There's videos about the software and all the typical things that you would think. But there is a trial version of the software. So if what you've seen say you like, there's an opportunity to download the trial version. It is the fully functional version of the software. There's no difference between that and production. The software license is valid for 45 days. The core forum, as Chris had mentioned, if you're looking for help and you're working through the software, the forum is an online forum, a message board where you can search for questions or post questions. And then on my team here, Kelly Leahy, I've included her email. If you want to take it a little bit further and reach out to Xerox to learn more specifically about solutions and automation, you can email Kelly. She's local here in Rochester, New York, and is our conduit to the sales organization so that she can coordinate any further sessions if you had some specifics. So with that, I'll send it back to the folks in the home office for PODI.
Okay, well thanks Todd. Thanks for that nice wrap up on how to get started and another really impressive case study. So what we saw today was kind of two ends of the spectrum, right? We saw Chris when his job shop, 25, 30 color jobs a day. He's using FreeFlow Core to automate. And then you saw the last case study from PremCom, which is a high volume shop, which is getting even more astounding results with the technology. So I'd like to thank Xerox for sponsoring this today, and Todd and Kelly and Andre and his team for making this available. And a big hearty thanks to Chris Bradshaw of AlphaGraphics for sharing his story with us today. So thank you everybody, and as Christine mentioned, you will get a PDF copy of the slides, and the webinar has been recorded, so if you have folks that want to view it later, we'll be able to get you a link shortly to get you there. But thanks again for hanging in there with us today, and hope you enjoyed it, and have a good rest of your day. Bye now everybody.
Thanks everybody for your time. Have a great day.